All right, with the lockdown continuing for millions of Australians, concerns arise around the productivity of employees at home. And how much can employees ask of their employers when they're working from home? To take us through it, Joydeep Kaur from People, Culture and Strategies joins us now live. Joydeep, great to have you on the program. So what's the deal here? How far can these employers go? Can they mandate what times they're working, when they work, what they do? What's the situation?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Good morning. This issue has been a live one since the onset of the pandemic and since employers have had their employees working from home. One of the things that is always challenging is that the longer that these things go on, the onset of resentment and anxiety and all of those things for people who are working from home becomes a bigger reality. And the flip side for organisations, for employers, is that leads to a perception, rightly or wrongly, that perhaps their employees are going to be less productive, not necessarily because they are rorting the system or that they're not honest people, but just because they are tired and jaded and fatigued and all of those kinds of things. And employers are really stuck in a very difficult place because if they probe too hard on those kinds of issues or being seen to be introducing too much rigour or rigidity around accountability in respect of their people, that might be met with even further resentment by their employees. And so what I'm seeing is a lot of employers really troubled by just knowing what it is that they can and can't say or ask or put in place in relation to what their people are doing. It's a really big problem for organisations. The longer this continues, it becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah, so how do we stop this then being the elephant in the room for these employers?
So I think the best way to look at it is that the starting position is that people, when they are working from home, should be replicating as much as they can the way that they would be working if they were working at their usual place of work. That has got to be the starting point. Now, the good employers are the ones who are constantly reminding employees that that is the starting point, but factoring in some of the realities of why that just simply can't work in practice. For example, if people, as is the case in New South Wales, are having to do remote learning in respect of children, they've got other people in their households, there are going to be limitations on their productivity. So the good employers are saying, well, look, notwithstanding that's a starting position, we understand that there are going to be particular challenges. And so what the even better employers are doing is saying, well, talk to us about what the challenges are that you're facing. We ask you to open up to us, because as a result of you opening up to us, we can put something in place that works better for you. And the more that we make this less of an elephant in the room and actually talk candidly about these things, the better it is for you and the better it is for us. Because we're all on the same page. There is a strong alignment in terms of what our expectations are and should be in what is a very difficult time for employers and employees alike.
Joydeep, I guess one of the good examples at the moment is something like the Olympics. I'm sure a lot of people working from home are keen to watch Australia perform, and they might have it on in the background. They might take a break to watch a certain race. Is that type of thing appropriate, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, people should be watching Ospreys rather than watching the Olympics. Is the first point that needs to be made. But to the extent that, yeah, there are going to be distractions, and the Olympics is a great example because there's an element of it's a sanctuary, it's a solace for so many people at the moment. It's been, I had one client describe it as an absolute godsend that it's on at the moment, particularly for people in New South Wales. Again, I think the employers who are dealing with this kind of issue well are the ones that are saying, look, we're actually not going to put hard and fast rules in and say you're not permitted to do that, because the reality is people will just find ways around it if that's something that they particularly want to do. People should be, in fact, employers can turn it into a positive and say, look, we want people to be watching it within moderation. We want people to be able to see those really key moments if there's a gold medal opportunity for Australia or whatever it might be. But we ask people to do this in moderation, and we ask people to actually, rather than do it in a clandestine manner, to be quite open about it. And so we take the shame away from when we might be doing something other than work, all in the interest of transparency. That actually makes employees feel a lot better because they know that it's okay. And the experience of most organisations is that when you introduce freedom within boundaries, that's when employees perform the best and the employer performs the best.
And Joydeep, how do you see this going forward as people start coming back to the office. Maybe there's, they work a few days at home, a few days in at the office. If an employer was to come to you with advice, what would you be saying?
Yeah, I'd be saying that there's so many learnings and so many opportunities for employers throughout this entire pandemic, and they will continue. A lot of organisations have now got to a point where they've realised that maybe 1, maximum 2 days a week of people working from home is something that can work very well for their productivity. There's a lot of assumptions that go with that in terms of perhaps not having to do remote learning for children and various other things. But once again, the key messages of a healthy employment relationship are always going to be based around transparency, clarity, good communication, and factoring in that, particularly in this environment, things can change very, very quickly. And so, yes, while you need to have some rules and guidelines, the most important thing is to have flexibility and agility within that particular framework, because otherwise you're just going to find that those guidelines you've got in place are going to come unstuck. So it's not going to be easy. But the good employers will be, as always, they'll be a couple of steps ahead. They will be understanding what's going to be happening as best they can in a few weeks, a few months' time. What might the 2022 working environment look like? And it's going to be very different to what it is currently.
Jody, great to check in with you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.